Aloha friends, and welcome back to our Aloha Country Living channel. Today we just came on to say hello and let you know how we are doing, give you a little bit of an update, and also to hear from you. How have you been and how are you doing in your country living journey today?
As usual, we're coming to you from beautiful rural Hawaii. Um, the sun is shining brightly, even though we're in the shade. The sky is bright, and we apologize if we're wincing or looking away just a bit, but we're thankful for some beautiful weather. Despite all the unsettling events we hear going on around the cities of this nation and the world, life in the countryside is going on not too different than at any other time. Despite lockdowns and shutdowns of various kinds, we experience a degree of freedom here in the countryside that is not afforded most other places.
And even though, just like most people, we may not be able to go out as often as we would like to, it has been so nice to be able to just come out into the nature, take hikes and walks around the fields here and orchards, and get the sunshine, get the fresh air, and feel at peace. Another reason why our lives haven't really been changed by this troublesome time is because I'm usually at home with children, homeschooling them, and so for me and the children, things haven't changed much at all, as well as Ryan going to work every day since he works at the hospital and he's deemed to be an essential worker now. So things are really not very different.
I guess the point of what we're saying is that this lifestyle that God has designed for us and that He has asked us to pursue, a life away from the hustle and bustle of the city, a life in the countryside where we grow our own provisions, where we can produce our own power and have our own sources of water, etc. This life is a resilient life. This is the opposite of a life in the city, which is, to be quite clear, it's just fragile. And life out here is natural and resilient. We would just like to take this opportunity to encourage those of you who haven't yet made the transition to begin that faith journey with God and moving your family into the country.
Yes, take this time while you're home, while you have some extra time possibly, to look at the world, look at the signs, and see what you can learn and what you should do at this time. If you haven't had time to learn about country living or about the prophecies, this is the time to do so.
And realize that the first steps toward moving to the country don't involve any finances. You can look at your situation, you can realize that it's not ideal, that you're not equipped to make all the purchases that you might need to make, but it doesn't actually need money at this point. What you need to begin with is you need time, and you need examine what the Spirit of Prophecy has to say on the subject. Examine the biblical prophecies. Realize the times that we're living in. Then make a decision to obey. Make a decision to follow God's instruction to, no matter what it takes, to get your family to a safer location, safer physically, mentally, spiritually. And then, after you've made that decision, begin to use whatever you have. I think of the story of Moses, where Moses was doubting God's call, and God said to Moses, "What is that in your hand?" And I would say to you the same thing. What is that in your hand? You have the internet, you probably have a computer or a smartphone, you have some books on your shelf, or if not, you have access to books online. Why not use this opportunity to familiarize yourself with country living, to familiarize yourself with what would it be like to have a home that was powered by the sun, to have water that was a resilient source from your own home, whether that be a well, or whether that be rainwater harvesting, or whether that be something that you get from a stream. What would it be like to grow your own food? What would you grow? What grows in your area? Where should you relocate? There are many things that require time and prayer and study to determine the next steps.
And also, even though you may be in the city or in towns, you can still start planting things. Plant things in pots on your balconies. Um, Learn from books or internet how to grow certain things.
When we felt the call to move to the country, um, it came at a rather unwelcome time. We weren't especially receptive to it, but when God's Spirit persisted in speaking to us, we were studying on the campus of Southern Adventist University. We had a second floor apartment with a small balcony, and we determined not only that we would obey, but that we didn't know what the next steps were, and we needed God to show us, but while we had time, which ended up being months, we determined to use that time effectively for preparation, spiritual preparation, mental preparation, physical preparation in the form of like saving up money. We began to plant things out on our windowsills, on our balcony, read books, buy books, watch videos online, and to prepare. We grew up in, relatively urban/suburban environments where a lot of these things didn't come natural to us. We had to learn these skills, and that can all be done free of charge.
This is also the time to maybe look at your possessions and see if you can downsize, because it will be a lot easier for you to move, especially if you have to move quickly, if you found a deal or something, to move quicker if you have less possessions.
As we were just reviewing these thoughts with you, a sentence from the Spirit of Prophecy came to my mind, and that sentence was, God will reveal from point to point what to do next. I'm going to read you a quotation here from Country Living, page 6, speaking of the experience of Lot. And it says here, the same voice that warned Lot to leave Sodom bids us, come out from among them and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean. Those who obey this warning will find a refuge. Let every man be wide awake and try to save his family. Let him gird himself or prepare himself for the work. There's that preparation we were talking about. Listen to the next sentence. God will reveal from point to point what to do next. We hear the call, the warning message come out. And then there is every man must be wide awake to try to save his family. We prepare ourselves, and then the next step is God will reveal from point to point what to do next. Don't expect that revelation to come unless you have followed the previous steps.
Yes, and as Ellen White says, as the light given to us, when we obey it, God shines more light on other areas. So it's the same way. As we obey and do what we can, what's in our hand, what's around us, do the preparation part, then we ask God and He reveals us the next step and the next step. And a lot of times, it will not be so simple. A lot of times, God will wait till the last minute or till to put you in certain situations where He will make a miracle and He'll open a way where there is no way. So don't be discouraged and don't say you can't leave the city because I don't have money, I don't have opportunities, I don't have anybody to help me, or any other excuses that you might have. God will, and He wants to make a miracle in your life.
Yeah, that makes me think of another quotation which I'd like to share from Christ Object Lessons, page 146. In relation to this topic, trying to understand, trying to have wisdom to know what is the right move, what shall I do, where shall I gain the skills and the resources and the money. I was thinking of this quote. It says here, you need not go to the ends of the earth for wisdom, for God is near. It is not the capabilities you now possess or ever will have that will give you success. It is that which the Lord can do for you.
Amen.
We need to have far less confidence in what man can do and far more confidence in what God can do for every believing soul. He longs to have you reach after Him by faith. He longs to have you expect great things from Him. He longs to give you understanding in temporal as well as spiritual matters. Right? At this moment, we're talking about temporal matters. He longs to give you understanding in temporal matters as well as in spiritual matters. He can sharpen the intellect. He can give you tact and skill. Put your talents to work. Ask God for wisdom, and it will be given you.
Yes, and I wanted to mention that country living is not just temporal, it is also a spiritual experience that you need to have. It's not just, oh, we want to run to the hills to, save ourselves. It's actually to prepare yourself for that crisis, to prepare your character, for God to work on you, to save your household, to save your children, to prepare your children for God's kingdom.
I would like to also mention that a lot of us focus on our role in the end of time in ministering to others, whether that be through evangelism, spreading the last day message, whether that be medical missionary work, attending to the sick and ill and the wounded in those last days. And I would just like to leave you with a thought here to consider, and that is, how are you supposed to carry on the work of evangelism? How are you supposed to be attending to the sick? How are you supposed to be providing food to the needy if you yourself are in the line at the soup kitchen? If you yourself have nothing to offer? Aren't you going to need electricity to carry on your ministry? Aren't you going to need some water to carry on your ministry? Aren't you going to need some food to prepare for others or for your own evangelistic team?
Absolutely.
And where is that food going to come from? That Isaiah promise of that bread and water shall be given him, read it again. That does not apply to the time we're talking to. That applies to the later, greater time of trouble.
Why don't we read it right now?
In Isaiah 33, verse 16, we read, "He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His waters shall be sure." Make sure, friends, that when others quote this verse to you, that you understand the proper application. Read the verse. The verse says that when this time comes, that we are going to be dwelling on high places. It's speaking of the mountains. It says his, meaning the Christians. Place of defense will be the munitions of rocks. What is that talking about? That is talking about the wilderness, the mountainous range, the caves. And it says here, during that time, when we've fled from the cities, when we've fled from the country homes, when we've fled from everywhere to the desolate and solitary places of the wilderness,
Jacob's trouble.
the time of Jacob's trouble, during that time, bread shall be given him, and his water shall be sure. That does not apply to today. That does not apply to the little time of trouble. God has specifically warned us and told us the provision for that time is that he has asked us to make preparation. Ellen White says that she saw the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. That for that time, we are to have a preparation of growing our own provisions, having our own country retreats. And through that, God will provide for the needs of our family, and God will provide for the needs of others who may need to come and join us in our country locations. But it is at a later time that God will miraculously, when we have fled the country properties due to being pursued by the enemies of our faith who were seeking to kill us, it will be at that time that God's people will have every earthly support cut off, and that our bread and water will be sure.
And we wanted to share these things from experience. We, as you know our story, have experienced country living. We have lived in our country home for 6 years before it was destroyed by lava. And even though we are still renting, we are in the country, and we are reaping those benefits of living in the country. And we are still looking for property. We're still determined to start over. And if we have time to start over again, this country living journey, you definitely have time to come out of the cities or towns that you live in and start this country living journey as well.
Just like the rest of you, we don't know the outcome of this current national emergency, this pandemic. We don't know how that will change or shape the future. But what we do know, regardless of whether there is a recovery in some months or if life returns exactly back to normal as it was before, regardless, let us take this time as an important wake-up call to realize the fragility of society, to realize that in a short period of time everything can go from prosperity and ease to austerity and ruin. Think of all the families who are losing their incomes. They're wondering where they're going to get their food. They're wondering if they're going to have their homes in a few months. Think about all those people and let us learn the lesson that we need to make preparation so that we can be resilient, whether that be in the form of having an emergency fund so that in the future when you lose a job or who knows what may happen, get sick, that you have months of income lined up so that you can provide for the essential needs of your family. Country living, having skills to know how to grow your own food so that when trouble comes, you can actually do that and not rely upon the supermarket. Here in Hawaii, it's estimated that 91% of all food consumed on this island is brought in. There is no need for that. We are dependent. We have cultivated dependence. But we, as individuals, can choose to do something different. There's nothing we can do about necessarily fixing all the problems of the world, but we can plan and prepare to put our family in a more solid position. Right now, I'm fortunate in the sense that I have work. If I did not, if I had lost my job, if I had been furloughed, if I'm furloughed in the future, guess what? My family is going to have everything it needs because we live below our means, meaning that we spend much less than we take in. And so there is a preparation. We're like ants preparing for the winter, as opposed to the grasshopper who plays and fiddles through the summer. Who is going to be prepared when the stress comes, when the trials come, when the trouble comes? Will it be the ant or the grasshopper? Friends, we all can be ants. Whether you can save $100 a month or 1,000 or 10,000, regardless, you can make preparation. You can make sure that your cupboard doesn't have 1 week's supply of food, rather it has 1 month's supply of food. There is something that all of us can do, however small, and whatever that is what we must do.
And there may be some of you watching who say, I don't have much money. We hardly make, living from one end of the month to the other. But you can still prepare yourself and still do country living wherever you are right now. Maybe you are not in a very remote place, but you're, kind of out of the town and you live where you have a little bit of land. Use that land. Use whatever you have next to you, whatever you have in your hands. So there should be no excuses, whether you live in America and you have abundance of things, or whether you live in a different country and you say it's impossible for us to do country living.
Nothing is impossible with God.
Yes.
And if God asked you to do it and He called you to do it, He will make a way. Don't let me hear anybody say that it's impossible. Because what you're doing is you're claiming that God is unjust and that He is asking of you something that cannot be done.
Yes.
And that is not who God is. There is much that we find in the Bible that people are presented with that appears impossible, but God makes a way, and He often requires something on their part to open that way. For example, when God's people approached the Jordan, and God gave instruction, and the instruction was, step in the water. And it wasn't until they stepped in the water that the waters parted.
Yes.
Many of us are outside on dry land and we're looking and we're saying, how am I supposed to get over that river?
Yes, and you know what? In my experience and experience of other people, God seemed to really like to make things impossible or seem to look impossible. before he opens the way. And you know why? Because he wants us to grow our faith. How are we going to stand in the final crisis if we have no faith? So he doesn't make things just easy and opens the way here and there. And for some people he does, but for a lot of us, we have to work very hard and we have to pray very hard and then see God open the way where there was no way.
And I think of that quotation by Ellen White where she says, speaking of country living in particular, she said, many will have to labor earnestly to open the way. In other words, it's not going to be easy necessarily. You know, I think of, there's so many stories we can share from our own experience, but about how God sometimes takes you to the edge of your limits before he provides relief, before he provides some source of help at the last minute.
Well, I can think of one when we were evacuating and we were looking everywhere to evacuate to rent a place somewhere where hundreds of people just lost their homes and they were all occupying all these rentals, and there was no way for us to find anything except for something very expensive 2 hours away from here. And the day we were going to go and sign for that rental, do you remember what happened?
And that day we received an email, and the email said that if you need it, here's a home. You can come in and you can live here.
Yes, and we found out later that it was free of charge. We were just to take care of the home, and that was amazing. And that's a lot of times how God works.
And so initially we, when we evacuated, we were there for a period of a few months at this place, which was graciously provided for us by God at the last minute. And then we were praying while we were there. We were praying, Lord, open the way for us to get back to the country.
Yes.
This is not the country. You have called us to the country. Our place is under siege, our country home, by lava, a river of flowing lava day and night for months at a time on the edge of our property. And we eventually, our property was consumed. But we prayed in this rental place, Lord, help us to get back to the country. And I received a call from actually a text from a coworker at the hospital, and they said, hey, I heard about this place, you know, an hour north of here that is being leased. Maybe you should take a look. And I, you know, sort of thanked them and brushed it off. I didn't see any virtue in pursuing that. And so then they said to me again, hey, have you checked in on that place? And so I thought maybe we'll just inquire, and that set things in motion that over the next few weeks, this property, this 7 acres property with a beautiful home and all of this was being leased, and we accepted that lease because God provided step-by-step evidence that this is where we should be. And we've been here now for a year and a half in this beautiful place, and we're thankful for God's providence to help us in our next step, which was saving money, preparing to buy our own land again. The thing that you need to realize about us is that we are like you. We are starting over. When we lost our home and when we lost our farm and everything that we had invested there, we lost it all without recompense, without insurance. And so we started over again from poverty. And here we are working with God day by day to be restored, to get a new place of our own. And so it can be done. You can do it.
And so we're here to encourage you, and as soon as we get the property, we're hoping to document the journey and share with you how we start over. What do we do for house, for water, for electricity, for growing food? And hopefully these videos will be of encouragement to you. And so many of you have wrote that it has been, and it has been such a blessing to read your comments. One gentleman wrote that it was that interview where we had with Andrew Henriquez, where we were explaining what happened to us and what we're envisioning to do. That was the interview that actually first encouraged him to look into country living, and now he is on his own journey. And so we're just so happy to hear from you and where you are in your country journey. So feel free to share with us, and your concerns, your questions, your prayer requests. We'll be happy to hear from you and answer as we can.
And if you'd like to see that interview that we did with Andrew and Hilary Henriquez, we're going to put the comment or the link in a comment down below. Well, by God's grace, we're all going to make it. We can, if we choose to partner with Him, overcome any obstacle. Now is an opportunity for us to study this country living message, to understand it better, and to make our choice. Will we obey God's instruction or will we not? If we do, God has committed the powers of heaven to working with us. I think of the quotation from Adventist Home that says, God will help His people find such homes outside of the cities. And if we choose not to follow God's counsel, can we expect God to interpose to save us? No. I'm going to read from you Second Selected Messages 356, paragraph 5. If we place ourselves under objectionable influences, keep in mind that this paragraph is about country living and leaving the cities. If we place ourselves under objectionable influences, can we expect God to work a miracle to undo the results of our wrong course? No, indeed. Get out of the cities as soon as possible and purchase a piece of land where you can have a garden and where your children can watch the flowers growing and learn from them the lessons of simplicity and purity. May God help us all as we choose His way.
And on this note, we'll end for now, but we hope to hear from you and we hope to see you in our next video. God bless.